Hi everyone, I'm Babs Hogan and welcome to Cheese Hangouts. Actually, today's show is Meat and Cheese Hangouts. My guest is Jeffrey Roberts, who is a well-known cheese expert and cheese writer. He's well-known, meaning globally well-known. He is a college professor, the co-founder of the Vermont Institute for Artisan Cheese. He is author of two books, and this is his first. He is a member of the International Cheese Guild, and for more than a decade, Jeff was active in Slow Food International. I encourage you to go to the website listed here on this page and check out his complete bio because there's more to learn about Jeff. His new book is called Salted and Cured. It examines the history and culture of preserved meats from 1630 to the present day. As you read it, you will learn new words. Let me give an example. In Italian, botellas means small sausage. In Chinese, sausage is lachang. In addition, you will read some amazing stories that he tells about the immigrants, their families, their work, their struggles, and their victories. I hope you enjoy the interview. Thanks for joining me today, Jeff. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to get started. I mentioned to you already that I love the style of your writing, and I was just wondering, where did you learn that?
Oh boy. Um, I think what I've been doing, especially with that book, unlike a lot of the academic writing that I might have done before, is thinking about stories that I would tell verbally.
Mm.
And a person who had an impact on me was Gordon Edgar, when his Cheddar book, which is I think, a really terrific book. It's really solid. And yet, as I was reading it, I said, Gordon's got a style that I like. It's There's a lot of content, there's a lot of meat or cheese in it, and
Mhm.
at the same time, it's done in a way to capture people's attention. There's some humor and so forth. And I decided that I would aim to use that sort of as a model, and I'm glad to hear that it worked.
Well, that's great. In fact, Gordon is on the list for Cheese Hangouts, and I hope to interview him really soon.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
I enjoyed reading your first book, and I'll put this up here. And it was published about 10 years ago, and it was a great introduction to, at least for me, to understand the artisan cheese people. Now let's talk about your new book, Salted and Cured, Savoring the Culture, Heritage, and the Flavor of America's Preserved Meats. So, it's been described as a literary feast, and I was wondering, I think it's a culinary feast, but it just makes you want to just enjoy the food.
Thank you. I was it is, as you have, since you've read both books,
Mhm.
it's so different than the Atlas. The Atlas was 345 individual profiles, and while there's a connection often between them that I refer to, when I decided to do this book on charcuterie and salumi, I wanted to be a lot more analytical.
Mhm.
So from I also have 10 years of teaching behind me, which has helped to inform how I see the world of food and agriculture and cuisine and so forth. And I think that that's helped because I teach much younger people about the history and culture of food. And for me, the word culture, heritage, um, in the title, and it captures what I wanted to do. It also turned out to be a much bigger research project than I initially expected,
Mhm.
but I learned a lot, and I hope that I've been able to translate that to people as well.
Well, I'm going to get to those interviews in just a few minutes. But first of all, I want to say that it's obvious that you have a great passion for good food, and you credit your ancestors for that interest and passion. And I want to just start out with in the introduction, you write, During my first visit to Italy as an adult, while not understanding the language, I felt it in my bones as the culture slipped quietly, perhaps loudly, into my soul. I sensed through taste and smell so many dimensions of myself, often without words to describe my emotions. That's fantastic writing.
Thank you.
Love
Thank
it.
you. There, there's so many ways that I could sort of fill that out. Um, there are two examples. One, my dad's mother, my grandfather on my father's side passed away long before I was born. Um, but my grandmother made strudel by hand.
Hmm.
And I mean, when I say by hand, we're talking about the phyllo dough.
Okay.
And she did it on her kitchen table. And that to me is a food that I wish I could capture. I've only had a handful over the years that got close to that. My mother's side, there was always, when my brother and I were little, there was always a little pot on the back of the stove in which the meatballs and the red sauce slowly cooked. And I have her Hoosier cupboard. That's late 19th, early 20th century oak cupboard.
Hmm.
Certain times of the year, especially in the summer when there's just the right humidity and temperature, I can open the door and I smell the red sauce on the burner. It's embedded in the wood.
That is so interesting. I love
And
it.
from my perspective, all of us, sometimes we lose it. All of us are hardwired
Hmm.
for smell. That's our first, and one of the things I talk about in the book. Smell is how we survive as mammals.
Hmm.
And those smells, I think, help to inform who we are as adults. Um, and everybody's got those memories, in my opinion.
Well, I just have to say that if that's true, then my ancestors were chocolate producers. Okay, so there are 14 chapters in the book, and they each tell their own story. Are you telling the story of each immigrant? And this is a story about immigrants preserving meat. So as I was reading through the book, the chapters, there were one or two that would kind of stand out. What about you? Is there one or two that really was high impact for you?
Well, it's very important. I think the first couple of chapters, the introductory chapters,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, food preservation, whether we're talking meat or cheese or grains or what have you, is a product of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes discovered by accident, but without it, we wouldn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back thousands of years. And what I found for those people who might be listening who are hikers and you take freeze-dried food on the trail with you, freeze drying is not a new technique.
Mm-hmm.
And native people in the Quicha in the Andes, they were freeze drying food.
Wow.
Thousands of years ago. The Inuit and the Tlingit were doing that with salmon.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
It is.
So part of what I wanted to do was to sort of set the stage that these ideas, these techniques are essential to life.
Mm-hmm.
And then they help to inform us and create these great foods that travel all the way through to the present. So for me, the first couple of chapters were really eye-opening, to say the least. I happen to, others, the La Quercia is clearly one from Iowa. First of all, Iowa, for so many of us today, is the land of industrial agriculture. And that was one of the responses that Kathy and Herb Eckhouse had. We want to do something different. And Iowa also turns out to be not only large industrial production, but they are the nation's leading organic hog producer and an organic corn producer.
Mhm.
So that's not something I knew anything about. And those animals are part of what support La Quercia as a processing company, let alone a great story of them.
Mhm.
The New York section, so many different producers. So you've got German American, you have Italian American, and then much more recent immigrants, let's say the one that I pointed out from the Balkans,
Mhm.
who are arriving in neighborhoods that they're often feeding their fellow countrymen. That's what they're all about. And Schaller and Weber in Manhattan, in what was Yorkville, is still one of the outposts of German American food anywhere in the country. And they do great stuff. So there's another, I mean, part of when you ask the question, I happen to like all of the chapters,
Right.
In part because they teach me something about the people, the
Mhm.
immigrants, the waves of people who arrive. And this is only one slice. I talk a little bit about the Germans and beer, but I didn't say anything about the Italians and making their own wine in the basement, for example, or
Yeah.
the Germans who arrive in Texas.
Oh yeah.
Part of the reason why I have such great barbecue and such great German-style foods in Texas is because of the Germans arriving there in the 1840s.
Hmm. And I don't know if you've ever been to Fredericksburg, but there's a lot of Germans there, and the food is incredible.